The familiar ache of betrayal burned in my chest as Vanessa clicked to the next slide, my words, my ideas, while 20 pairs of eyes remained fixed on her performance. Her voice carried confidently across the conference room, explaining the market segmentation strategy I had developed over countless late nights. The strategy she had stolen, again. As you can see, Vanessa gestured toward the projection with manicured fingers. This approach targets Gen Z consumers through micro-influencer partnerships rather than traditional celebrity endorsements. My fingernails dug crescents into my palms beneath the table. The PowerPoint transition effect, the one I'd specifically chosen, flashed as she moved to my conclusion slide. The déjà vu was suffocating. In my previous life, this moment had blindsided me, leaving me gasping like a landed fish, while my career prospects evaporated. But not this time. This time, the knife slid between my ribs with expected precision. I forced my expression into practiced neutrality as Director Chen nodded approvingly. The scent of expensive cologne and fresh coffee mingled in the air-conditioned room, a stark contrast to the sour taste of rage in my mouth. 6 months earlier, I had jolted awake gasping, my sheets twisted around my legs like restraints. The familiar glow-in-the-dark stars on my ceiling, stars that shouldn't have been there, stared back at me. I'd removed those childish decorations after my promotion to senior marketing strategist, a promotion that apparently hadn't happened yet. My phone, my old phone with the cracked screen protector, showed a date that made my stomach drop. March 15th, 2020. 3 years in the past. The day before, I would make the catastrophic mistake of sharing my breakthrough campaign idea with Vanessa Winters, my mentor and supposed friend. I stumbled to the bathroom, the cool tiles shocking against my bare feet. The face in the mirror looked younger, less haunted. No premature worry lines etched between my brows. No hollow cheeks from stress-induced weight loss after the public humiliation. After Vanessa had claimed my work as her own and painted me as the desperate copycat. "I'm back," I whispered, my voice trembling as I gripped the sink edge. "I'm actually back." The realization crashed over me in waves. I had a second chance. Knowledge of the future, the ability to prevent my downfall. That morning, I called in sick, something my eager, ambitious past self would never have done. Instead of working on the proposal I'd originally shared with Vanessa, I spent the day crafting a new strategy. I would feed her exactly what she wanted, bait for a trap years in the making. Back in the present meeting room, Vanessa's presentation concluded to enthusiastic applause. Her emerald blouse, purchased after her last promotion, I remembered bitterly, caught the fluorescent light as she took a theatrical bow. Any questions?" she asked, her gaze sweeping the room before landing on me with barely concealed triumph. Director Chen turned in his leather chair, the material creaking beneath his weight. "Mia, I noticed your presentation folder is empty. Were you planning to share something today as well?" All eyes shifted to me. The silence hummed with expectation. In my previous life, I had erupted, accused Vanessa of theft, and destroyed my reputation in one catastrophic outburst. This time, I smiled. "I apologize, Director Chen. I've been working on something, but it's not quite ready." My voice emerged steady, betraying none of the thundering pulse in my ears. Vanessa's smile widened, victorious. "I'd be happy to mentor Mia more closely," she offered, her voice dripping with false concern. "Perhaps she's struggling with the creative direction." The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as colleagues exchanged uncomfortable glances. The pity in their eyes should have stung, but instead, it fueled me. Let them think me incompetent. Let Vanessa believe she'd won. "That's very generous," I replied, meeting her gaze with unusual calmness that made her smile falter for just a moment. "I'd appreciate the guidance." Later that night, alone in my apartment, I reviewed the evidence I'd secretly gathered of Vanessa's theft. Screenshots of my original files with timestamps. Recordings of our conversations where she'd probed for details, emails where she'd asked innocent questions about my approach. The blue light of my laptop illuminated the room as I finalized my resignation letter, the words flowing easily. In my past life, I'd fought publicly and lost everything, my reputation, my career trajectory, even my confidence. This time would be different. This time I wouldn't fight at all. I saved the letter, closed my laptop, and walked to the window. The city lights twinkled below, a constellation of possibilities. The cool glass pressed against my forehead as I smiled into the darkness. Sometimes the most devastating move in chess isn't an attack, but a strategic retreat. Vanessa had no idea what was coming. How could she? She thought we were playing the same game as before. But I had already changed the rules. The Nielsen data clearly shows a 27% increase in consumer engagement when we pivot to experiential marketing, Vanessa announced during our weekly team huddle, her voice carrying across the cramped meeting room. My stomach clenched. Those were my exact findings. The market research I'd conducted over 3 weekends, analyzing trends that would reshape our industry within months. Research I'd deliberately saved on the shared drive where I knew she snooped. The team nodded appreciatively while I traced the wood grain patterns on the conference table, feeling the smooth finish beneath my fingertips. The bitter scent of burnt coffee from the overworked machine in the corner matched my mood perfectly. Brilliant insight, Vanessa, Director Chen said, his eyes crinkling with approval. This is exactly the kind of forward thinking we need. I glanced up just in time to catch Vanessa's fleeting look in my direction, a mixture of triumph and wariness. She still expected me to challenge her. The old Mia would have. Instead, I smiled and jotted meaningless notes in my planner. 2 days later, the company-wide email arrived with a ping that echoed through the open office. The harsh glare of my monitor illuminated the announcement. Vanessa Winters, promoted to Senior Marketing Strategist effective immediately. My position, my title from my previous life. Congratulations are in order! Director Chen's voice boomed as he emerged from his office, champagne bottle in hand. Vanessa's recent insights have caught the attention of our CEO himself. Colleagues gathered around her desk, their excited chatter washing over me in waves as I remained seated, watching the performance unfold. The cork popped with a celebratory bang that made me flinch. "Speech!" someone called out. Vanessa stood, smoothing her designer skirt. "I'm honored and honestly a little overwhelmed," she said, her practiced humility making my teeth clench. "I couldn't have done it without this amazing team." Her gaze found mine across the room, and special thanks to Mia, who's always been so open with her ideas. The thinly veiled mockery hung in the air between us. A few colleagues glanced my way, their expressions a mixture of pity and curiosity. I raised my paper cup in a silent toast, my face a careful mask of professional courtesy. That evening, I stayed late, waiting until the office emptied. The security lights cast long shadows as I moved through the deserted workspace. I needed to confirm my suspicions before executing the next phase of my plan. The IT system logs revealed exactly what I expected. Vanessa had accessed my personal drive yesterday at 7:42 p.m., long after I'd left for the day. Not only had she viewed my files, but she deleted several key backups of my work, research that would have proven the ideas were mine originally. What she didn't know was that I'd anticipated this move. Every file was backed up in triplicate, on my personal cloud account, on an external drive at home, and in encrypted emails I'd sent to myself. In my previous life, I'd been caught unprepared. This time, I was 3 steps ahead. I logged out and gathered my belongings, including the small cactus that had been my desk companion for 2 years. The elevator doors closed with a soft ding, reflecting my resolute expression in their polished surface. At home, I opened my laptop and finalized the letter I'd been crafting for weeks. My resignation, effective immediately. No 2 weeks' notice, no forwarding address, no explanation. I printed the letter on heavy cream stationery, signed it with a flourish, and slipped it into an envelope. Tomorrow morning, it would appear on Director Chen's desk before anyone arrived. By the time they read it, I would be gone. My desk cleared, my access cards left behind, my company phone factory reset. The Anderson account presentation was scheduled for the day after tomorrow, a major client worth millions in annual revenue. Vanessa had been boasting about leading it, not realizing that only I had the complete data set and final presentation deck. She had stolen my research but missed the crucial implementation strategy that made it valuable. I closed my laptop and walked to the window of my apartment. The city lights blurred through a light rain that had begun to fall, droplets racing down the glass like tears I refused to shed. The cool air from the vent raised goosebumps on my arms as I imagined the chaos that would unfold in my absence. My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. Anderson presentation prep, final review. I dismissed it with a swipe and turned off all notifications. By this time tomorrow, my company email would be bouncing messages back to their senders, and I packed a small bag, enough for a week at the extended stay hotel I'd already booked across town. The rhythmic sound of the rain against the windows accompanied my methodical movements. Everything of importance was already relocated to my new temporary home. Morning came with the soft, golden light of early autumn filtering through my curtains. I dressed carefully in my favorite outfit, not for the office, but for myself. A final ritual before shedding the skin. The security guard nodded sleepily as I entered the building at 6:30 a.m., hours before my usual arrival time. Early bird today, Miss Chen? Catching the worm, I replied with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. The office was silent as I placed the envelope on Director Chen's keyboard where he couldn't miss it. I emptied my desk quickly, efficiently, leaving nothing personal behind. The cactus, my spare shoes, the emergency chocolate bars in my drawer all disappeared into my bag. By 7:15 a.m., I stood in the elevator for the last time, watching the floor numbers descend. My access card left neatly beside the resignation letter. My company phone in Director Chen's drawer, wiped clean of all personal data. As I walked out of the building into the crisp morning air, my personal phone vibrated. A text from my only work friend Zoe. Running late, save me a donut from the morning meeting? I didn't reply. By the time she read my non-response, I would be sitting in a cafe across town, watching my email account fill with increasingly panicked messages about the missing Anderson presentation. The weight that had pressed on my chest for months, years if I counted my previous life, began to lift with each step that carried me away from the glass tower. The scent of fresh bread from a nearby bakery filled my lungs as I took my first truly free breath. Let Vanessa have her moment of glory. Let her bask in her stolen success. The clock was ticking, and she didn't even know it. 3 missed calls from an unknown number lit up my phone screen as I sipped my latte in the sunlit corner of Blackbird Cafe. The bitter chocolate notes of the espresso complemented the sweet satisfaction coursing through me. I knew exactly who was calling. My new apartment, a minimalist studio with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river, felt like a fortress. I'd paid 3 months' rent in advance, using savings I'd carefully accumulated since my rebirth. The morning light streamed across the hardwood floors as I unpacked my sparse belongings, taking my time with each item. My phone buzzed again, this time a text from Zoe. WTF happened? Everyone's losing their minds. Vanessa looks like she's about to explode. Call me. I smiled, but didn't respond. Instead, I turned on my laptop and logged into my personal email. As expected, my work account had already been deactivated, standard procedure for immediate resignations. But not before I'd received 17 urgent messages in the 2 hours since my departure. The Anderson presentation was scheduled for 2:00 p.m. tomorrow. By now, Vanessa would be discovering that the files she'd stolen were incomplete. The crucial market analysis that made the strategy viable was missing, along with the finalized presentation deck. She had fragments of brilliance, without the framework to make them shine. My phone rang again. Zoe, this time I answered. Mia? Oh my God, are you okay? Are you sick? Did something happen? Her words tumbled out in a breathless rush, the background noise suggesting she was hiding in the stairwell to make this call. I'm fine, Zoe. I just decided it was time for a change. The calm in my voice surprised even me. A change? You disappeared without telling anyone. Chen is furious, and Vanessa? She lowered her voice to a whisper. Vanessa is completely freaking out about the Anderson presentation. She keeps saying you sabotaged her. The irony made me laugh softly. How exactly did I sabotage her by leaving my job? She says you took all the files for the presentation. She can't find the final deck anywhere, and apparently, you were the only one with the complete market analysis. Zoe paused. Did you take them? I ran my finger along the cool granite of my new kitchen counter. I didn't take anything that wasn't mine to begin with. Silence stretched between us before Zoe whispered, Oh my God, she stole your work, didn't she? That's why you left. I have to go, Zoe. Take care of yourself. I ended the call before she could ask more questions, before my resolve could weaken. Zoe had been kind to me, but she wasn't part of my new life. By evening, my voicemail was full. Most messages were from Vanessa, evolving from accusatory, "How dare you leave us hanging like this?" to desperate, "Please, Mia, I need the Anderson files. I know you have them," to pleading, "I'll give you full credit, I swear. Just send me the presentation, please." I listened to each one, savoring the escalating panic in her voice as the clock ticked closer to the presentation she couldn't possibly deliver. Director Chen called twice, his messages more measured but equally urgent. "Mia, this is highly unprofessional. Whatever grievances you have, we can discuss them like adults. But the Anderson account is at stake." I deleted them all and slept soundly for the first time in months. The next afternoon, precisely at 2:15 p.m., Zoe texted me again. "Total disaster. Vanessa tried to wing it. Anderson's CEO asked questions she couldn't answer. They're threatening to pull the account." I pictured the scene. Vanessa sweating under the fluorescent lights of the conference room, fumbling through incomplete data while the Anderson executives exchanged concerned glances. The thought warmed me as I curled up on my new couch, watching raindrops race down my window. 3 days after my departure, the calls from Vanessa became truly desperate. "Mia, please," her voice cracked in my voicemail. "They're blaming me for losing Anderson. Chen is talking about reviewing my promotion. I don't understand why you're doing this to me." The metallic taste of justice lingered on my tongue as I deleted the message. She still didn't get it. This wasn't something I was doing to her. This was the natural consequence of what she had done to herself. My severance package arrived via courier the following week, a generous sum that reflected the company's desperation to maintain goodwill with a departed employee who knew too much. I added it to my growing financial cushion and began researching consulting opportunities. The heavy scent of possibility hung in the air of my apartment as I created a new professional email address, subtly altered my resume, and began reaching out to contacts in the industry. Not as Mia Chen, former marketing coordinator, but as MJ Chen, independent marketing consultant with a specialty in emerging consumer trends. 2 weeks after my resignation, I received an email from a rival firm seeking expertise for a short-term project. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. In my previous life, I'd watched this company revolutionize the market with strategies I had conceptualized but never implemented. Now, I had the chance to guide them directly. I accepted the contract and threw myself into the work, carefully building my reputation under my slightly altered professional identity. Each successful project added to my growing portfolio and network of satisfied clients. 3 months passed in a productive blur. My phone had long since stopped ringing with calls from my former workplace. According to Zoe's occasional updates, Vanessa had managed to retain her promotion, despite losing the Anderson account, having successfully blamed the fiasco on my unprofessional departure. I was browsing a local cafe menu when fate intervened in the form of a familiar voice ordering a complicated coffee drink. I glanced up to see Robert Anderson himself, CEO of Anderson Enterprises, impatiently tapping his designer watch while waiting for his order. The universe had just handed me an opportunity too perfect to ignore. I deliberately bumped into him while reaching for my own drink. "I'm so sorry," I apologized, meeting his eyes with practiced surprise. "Mr. Anderson? From Anderson Enterprises?" His expression shifted from annoyance to curiosity. "Do we know each other?" "Not officially," I smiled, extending my hand. "MJ Chen, I've studied your company's market positioning extensively. Your recent pivot to experiential marketing was brilliant, though I noticed a few untapped opportunities in the execution." His eyebrows rose as he accepted my handshake. "Is that so? Most people just compliment the success without noting the flaws." The barista called his name and he collected his drink. I should have walked away then, maintained the mystique of our brief encounter. Instead, I took a calculated risk. "The demographic analysis in your last campaign missed a key intersection between Gen Z spending habits and sustainability concerns," I said, watching his expression carefully. "It's why your engagement metrics plateaued after the initial surge." He stared at me for a long moment, the steam from his coffee creating a momentary barrier between us. Then he pulled out a business card. My office, tomorrow at 10 o'clock a.m. Bring those untapped opportunities with you. As he walked away, I felt the first genuine smile in months spread across my face. The chess pieces were moving exactly as I'd anticipated. The game was far from over. MJ Chen, there's a call for you on line 2. My assistant's voice crackled through the intercom of my new office, a sleek space with views of the city skyline that I'd earned through 6 months of strategic consulting work. I picked up the phone, already suspecting who it might be. This is MJ. Ms. Chen, I'm calling from Westridge Capital. The woman's voice was crisp, professional. We're conducting background checks on a Vanessa Winters who's applied for our Director of Marketing position. She listed you as a reference. The irony nearly made me laugh out loud. Vanessa had no idea that MJ Chen was me. She was likely using my name based on industry rumors about a brilliant consultant who'd helped Anderson Enterprises recover from a marketing disaster. I see, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. And what would you like to know? Ms. Winters claims to have spearheaded several major campaigns at Pinnacle Marketing. We're particularly interested in her work on the Nielsen Research Initiative. My work, my research, my initiative. I'm afraid I can't verify those claims, I said carefully. In fact, I have reason to believe Ms. Winters has a history of appropriating others' work and claiming it as her own. The silence on the other end was heavy with recalculation. That's concerning. Would you be willing to elaborate? I would suggest speaking with Mia Chen, who worked directly with Miss Winters at Pinnacle. I believe she could provide specific examples. I knew they would never reach me under that name. My old number was disconnected, and Pinnacle would only confirm my dates of employment. After ending the call, I swiveled in my chair to face the window. Rain pattered against the glass, distorting the city lights into watery smears of color. This was the third company that had called me about Vanessa in the past month. Apparently, she was desperately job hunting, a fact confirmed by Zoe's occasional texts. I heard Vanessa's looking to jump ship, Zoe had written last week. Anderson disaster still haunting her. Chen's watching her like a hawk now. I hadn't planned this particular consequence, but I welcomed it nonetheless. The industry was smaller than most people realized, and reputations traveled fast, especially when helped along by strategic comments from a respected consultant. My phone buzzed with a calendar notification. Meeting with Westridge Board, 2 p.m. tomorrow. Another consulting opportunity and another chance to expand my influence. I confirmed the appointment and returned to reviewing the proposal on my screen. The next morning, I arrived at the Westridge Capitol building 15 minutes early, dressed in a charcoal suit that projected confidence without ostentation. The lobby's marble floors echoed with my footsteps as I approached the reception desk. MJ Chen for the 2 p.m. meeting, I stated, presenting my ID. The receptionist smiled. Yes, Ms. Chen. The board is actually gathering early for a pre-meeting. You can head right up to the 32nd floor. The elevator rose smoothly, giving me a moment to center myself. When the doors opened, I stepped into a plush waiting area where a familiar figure stood with her back to me, gesturing animatedly to an older man in an expensive suit, Vanessa. My heart stuttered before settling into a steady, determined rhythm. She looked different, thinner, with dark circles visible even beneath her expertly applied concealer. Her once immaculate blouse had a coffee stain near the cuff. Before I could decide whether to retreat or advance, the man noticed me. Ah, you must be MJ Chen. Perfect timing. We were just discussing our marketing challenges. Vanessa turned, her professional smile freezing, as confusion flickered across her face. She didn't recognize me immediately. My hair was different, my posture more confident, my entire demeanor transformed by success and purpose. Then recognition dawned, her eyes widening in shock. Mia? It's MJ, actually, I corrected smoothly, extending my hand to the man beside her. A pleasure to meet you, Mr. Harrison, James Harrison, CEO. He shook my hand firmly. I see you two know each other? Vanessa's face had drained of color, her knuckles white around the portfolio she clutched. We worked together, briefly. At Pinnacle Marketing, I confirmed with a pleasant smile. Though I was in a different role then. Harrison looked between us, sensing the tension but misinterpreting its cause. Well, this is convenient. Ms. Winters is interviewing for our marketing director position, and you're here to consult on our overall strategy. Perhaps you could both join the board meeting and show us how you might collaborate. The trap couldn't have been more perfect if I'd designed it myself. I'd be delighted, I replied, watching Vanessa struggle to maintain her composure. The boardroom was imposing, all dark wood and leather chairs surrounding a massive table. 8 board members watched with varying degrees of interest as Harrison introduced us. Ms. Winters was just about to present her vision for our marketing department, Harrison explained, gesturing for Vanessa to begin. She moved to the front of the room on unsteady legs, connecting her laptop to the projector. I took a seat at the far end of the table, folding my hands patiently. The presentation she launched into was polished but derivative, standard marketing approaches with a thin veneer of innovation. I recognized several slides as modified versions of my own work from Pinnacle, though she'd clearly created these herself. As you can see, she continued, her voice gaining confidence as she settled into familiar territory. My approach focuses on multi-channel engagement with emphasis on— Excuse me, I interrupted gently. That consumer behavior model you're referencing, is that based on the Nielsen research from last year? She faltered, eyes darting to me. Yes, it incorporates those findings. Interesting, I mused, because that model was actually disproven by the Forrester study published 3 months ago. Consumer behavior has shifted significantly since the pandemic. The board members exchanged glances. One woman leaned forward. Ms. Winters, are you familiar with the Forrester study? Vanessa's smile tightened. I'm aware of it, but I found the methodology questionable. The Nielsen approach has been more consistent with my observations. Perhaps in past quarters, I acknowledged. But the market is evolving rapidly. In fact, my recent work with Anderson Enterprises demonstrated that the Forrester model more accurately predicts current consumer responses. At the mention of Anderson, several board members straightened in their chairs. Harrison's eyebrows rose. You worked with Anderson? They've shown remarkable recovery in the past quarter. I led their strategic repositioning, I confirmed modestly, after they experienced some difficulties with their previous marketing direction. Vanessa's face flushed with anger and humiliation. She knew exactly what difficulties I was referring to. The meeting deteriorated rapidly for her from there. Every point she made, I gently countered with more recent data or more nuanced analysis. Not aggressively, not unkindly. Simply with the quiet authority of someone who knew more and understood better. By the time Harrison thanked her for her presentation, her hands were visibly shaking as she disconnected her laptop. And now, Harrison turned to me, we'd love to hear your thoughts on our current market position, Ms. Chen. I rose and moved to the front of the room, passing Vanessa as she returned to her seat. The scent of her familiar perfume, now tinged with nervous sweat, filled my nostrils as our shoulders nearly touched. Before I begin, I said, addressing the board, I want to acknowledge Ms. Winters' presentation. There were several valuable insights there that align with my own thinking. It was a small mercy, one I hadn't planned to offer, but the defeated slump of her shoulders as she sank into her chair stirred something unexpected in me. Not pity exactly, but a reminder of my own purpose. This wasn't about destroying Vanessa, it was about reclaiming what was mine and building something greater. My presentation was concise, innovative, and backed by proprietary research I'd conducted over the past 6 months. The board was engaged throughout, asking thoughtful questions that I answered with confidence. When I finished, Harrison was beaming. Remarkable, Ms. Chen. Truly remarkable. I think I speak for the entire board when I say we'd like to move forward with your recommendations immediately. As the meeting concluded, Vanessa slipped out without making eye contact with anyone. I pretended not to notice, engaging Harrison in conversation about implementation timelines. Later that evening, as I worked in my home office, my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. How dare you ambush me like that? You've been sabotaging me all along, haven't you? This isn't over. Vanessa, she'd found my new number somehow. I didn't respond, but I saved the message. Evidence had proven valuable in the past. The following week, I received an unexpected call from James Harrison. MJ, I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Not at all, I replied, setting aside the investment prospectus I'd been reviewing. What can I do for you? I wanted to let you know that we've decided not to move forward with Ms. Winters for the director position. He paused, and I'm calling to ask if you might consider taking the role yourself. The offer was tempting but didn't align with my longer-term strategy. I'm flattered, Mr. Harrison, but I prefer the flexibility of consulting at this stage. I thought you might say that, he sighed. Well, the offer remains open. In the meantime, we'd like to extend your consulting contract for another 6 months. After we finalized the details, I returned to the investment prospectus. Technova, a struggling startup with revolutionary potential that I remembered from my previous life. In that timeline, they had exploded onto the scene about 8 months from now, their valuation increasing tenfold overnight. With my accumulated savings and consulting fees, I had enough to make a significant investment. I completed the transaction that evening, becoming one of Technova's earliest major investors. 3 months later, Technova announced a breakthrough exactly as I'd anticipated. My investment tripled in value overnight, and industry analysts predicted continued exponential growth. I used a portion of these new funds to establish a shell company, Horizon Ventures, and began quietly purchasing shares in Pinnacle Marketing's parent corporation. Each transaction was small enough to avoid attention, but together they accumulated rapidly. By the time I'd finished my morning coffee 6 months after leaving Pinnacle, Horizon Ventures owned 22% of the company, making me the second largest shareholder. The quarterly shareholders meeting was scheduled for next week. My invitation, addressed to the CEO of Horizon Ventures, had arrived yesterday. It was time for the next phase of my plan. The Pinnacle corporate headquarters looked exactly as I remembered, a gleaming glass tower reaching toward the sky, its logo illuminated against the morning sun. I adjusted my designer blazer as the town car pulled to a smooth stop at the entrance. Thank you, I told the driver, stepping onto the sidewalk with deliberate confidence. 6 months had transformed me. My hair, once pulled back in a practical ponytail, now fell in elegant waves past my shoulders. The nervous energy that had once made me fidget had been replaced by a calm assurance that came from knowing exactly how events would unfold. The security guard at the front desk didn't recognize me. Name and purpose of visit? M.J. Chen, CEO of Horizon Ventures, I replied, presenting my ID and invitation. I'm here for the quarterly shareholders meeting. He checked his list, eyes widening slightly at the company name. Of course, Ms. Chen. 15th floor, boardroom A. They're expecting you. The elevator ride gave me a moment of quiet reflection. The last time I'd stood in this elevator, I'd been leaving with my small box of personal items, heart racing with uncertainty despite my careful planning. Now I returned as a major shareholder, about to change the company's trajectory forever. The boardroom doors were already open when I arrived, revealing a gathering of Pinnacle's most powerful figures. Director Chen stood near the window, deep in conversation with the CFO. The board members clustered around the coffee service, exchanging pleasantries. And there was Vanessa, now officially marketing director, according to the nameplate before her seat, arranging papers with nervous precision. She wore the success like an ill-fitting garment, her shoulders tense beneath her expensive blouse. I paused in the doorway, allowing the moment to stretch until someone noticed me. The CEO, Marcus Wells, was the first to look up. "Ah, you must be the representative from Horizon Ventures," he said, crossing the room with his hand extended. "Marcus Wells, we're intrigued by your company's recent interest in Pinnacle." "M.J. Chen," I replied, shaking his hand firmly. "And yes, we see tremendous potential in Pinnacle, despite some recent setbacks." His smile tightened at the reference to the company's declining stock value, a direct result of losing the Anderson account and several other major clients over the past 6 months. "Well, we're always pleased to welcome new investors," he said, gesturing toward the table. "Please join us. We're about to begin." I took my assigned seat directly across from Vanessa, whose head remained bent over her documents. She hadn't noticed me yet. "Before we start," Marcus announced once everyone was seated, "I'd like to introduce our newest major shareholder. Horizon Ventures has acquired a significant position in Pinnacle over the past quarter. Their CEO, M.J. Chen, joins us today." Vanessa's head snapped up at the mention of my name, her eyes widening as they met mine across the polished expanse of the table. The color drained from her face so rapidly I thought she might faint. Recognition rippled through the room as others who had known me made the connection. Director Chen's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. The CFO squinted at me in confusion. "Thank you for the warm welcome," I said into the stunned silence, my voice carrying easily through the room. "I look forward to helping Pinnacle reclaim its market position." Marcus looked between me and the others, sensing the tension but not understanding its source. "You're familiar with our company beyond the investment perspective?" "Very much so," I smiled. "Until 6 months ago, I was a marketing coordinator here, though I went by Mia then, rather than MJ. The revelation landed like a thunderclap. Director Chen set down his cup with a clatter. "Mia Chen? The one who resigned without notice?" "The very same," I confirmed pleasantly. Vanessa found her voice at last, though it emerged strangled. "This is unexpected." "Life is full of surprises," I replied, holding her gaze until she looked away. Marcus cleared his throat. "Well, this is unusual, but let's proceed with our agenda. First item, quarterly performance review." The CFO's presentation was grim. Revenue down 18% year over year, client retention at a 5-year low, marketing expenses up with diminishing returns. When he finished, Marcus turned to the shareholders. "Questions or comments before we move to departmental reports?" I raised my hand slightly. "If I may?" He nodded, clearly apprehensive about what might come next. "The numbers tell a concerning story," I began, opening the leather portfolio I'd brought. "But they don't explain the cause. I'd like to address that directly." I removed a USB drive and handed it to the technical assistant. "Would you mind connecting this to the display?" As he complied, I continued. 6 months ago, I left Pinnacle abruptly. There was speculation about my reasons, but I never shared the truth publicly. Today, that changes. The screen illuminated with a split display. On the left, my original research documents with their creation timestamps and metadata clearly visible. On the right, Vanessa's presentations using the same material, dated days or weeks later. "What you're seeing is evidence of systematic intellectual theft," I explained calmly. "For months, my work was being appropriated without attribution. The Nielsen Research Initiative that was praised so highly? Mine. The Gen Z engagement strategy? Also mine. The Anderson proposal that ultimately failed? An incomplete version of my work." The room had gone completely still. Vanessa's breathing was audible in the silence, quick and shallow. "That's a serious accusation," Marcus said carefully. "It's not an accusation. It's a documented fact." I nodded to the assistant, who advanced to the next slide at my request. This one showed email exchanges between Vanessa and various team members, with key phrases highlighted. "Don't share this with Mia yet," and "let's present this before she finalizes her version." I didn't just keep copies of my work, I explained. I maintained records of the entire pattern of behavior. The next slides showed recorded meeting minutes, calendar invitations that had been altered, and finally the system logs showing Vanessa accessing and deleting files from my personal drive. Director Chen had gone pale. "Why didn't you bring this to me when it was happening?" I turned to him with a level gaze. "Would you have believed me? A junior coordinator accusing your star performer?" His silence was answer enough. When I realized what was happening again, yes, again, as this wasn't the first time, I made a strategic decision. Rather than fighting a battle I couldn't win within the system, I removed myself from it. I took my talents elsewhere, built my reputation independently, and returned when I had the leverage to ensure I would be heard. Marcus was staring at the evidence on the screen, his expression hardening. "Ms. Winters, do you have a response to these allegations?" Vanessa's hands trembled as she attempted to straighten her papers. This is a gross mischaracterization. We worked collaboratively. Ideas flow freely in a team environment. To claim ownership of concepts we all contributed to is... The timestamps and access logs don't support that explanation," I interrupted gently. nor do the emails where you explicitly instructed others to keep information from me. She changed tactics, her voice taking on a wounded quality. I mentored you, Mia. I gave you opportunities, and this is how you repay me? By manufacturing evidence and orchestrating some elaborate revenge scheme? I smiled, having anticipated this exact response. I haven't even shown the most compelling evidence yet. With another nod to the assistant, the screen changed to display a series of voicemails, transcribed and dated, that Vanessa had left on my phone after my departure. Please, Mia, I need the Anderson files. I know you have them. They're blaming me for losing Anderson. Chen is talking about reviewing my promotion. I don't understand why you're doing this to me. Each desperate message contradicted her claim of collaborative creation. Each one confirmed that she knew exactly whose work she had presented as her own. The room erupted in murmurs as board members leaned toward each other, discussing the implications. Vanessa sat frozen, her carefully constructed facade crumbling visibly. Ms. Chen, Marcus addressed me directly, his tone now respectful. What exactly are you hoping to achieve by sharing this information today? I closed my portfolio deliberately. Transparency, accountability, and a restructuring of Pinnacle's leadership to ensure these ethical breaches don't continue to damage the company's performance and reputation. You want Vanessa fired, Director Chen stated bluntly. I want the board to make decisions based on complete information, I corrected, including the fact that I've secured the return of the Anderson account to Pinnacle, contingent upon new leadership in the marketing department. This announcement caused another stir. The Anderson account had been Pinnacle's largest client before their departure. How did you manage that? The CFO asked incredulously. I've been consulting with Anderson Enterprises for the past 6 months, I explained. They've been extremely satisfied with my work and are willing to return to Pinnacle if I oversee their account personally. Marcus leaned forward. Are you proposing to return to Pinnacle as an employee? No, I replied. I'm proposing a complete restructuring of the marketing department, with external oversight from Horizon Ventures to ensure ethical standards are maintained. I would consult during the transition, but remain independent. The implications were clear. As a major shareholder, I now had the leverage to demand these changes. Vanessa finally found her voice again. This is absurd. You can't just walk in here and dictate. Actually, she can, the CFO interrupted, having clearly done the math on what the Anderson account's return would mean for the company's struggling finances. Horizon Ventures owns 22% of Pinnacle, and Ms. Chen has apparently secured the return of our largest former client. The board would be obligated to consider her proposals seriously. Marcus nodded slowly. I believe we need to discuss this in detail. Perhaps we should take a brief recess before continuing. As the room began to empty, Vanessa remained seated, staring at me with a mixture of hatred and disbelief. When we were nearly alone, she hissed across the table. How did you do this? How could you possibly afford to buy into Pinnacle? I gathered my materials unhurriedly. I invested in the future, Vanessa, something you were always too focused on immediate gains to consider. You've ruined me, she whispered, her voice breaking. I paused, meeting her gaze directly. No, Vanessa, you ruined yourself. I simply ensured there were consequences. The boardroom door closed behind me with a satisfying click as I stepped into the hallway, leaving Vanessa alone with the evidence of her actions displayed on the screen behind her. In the corridor, Marcus approached me cautiously. Ms. Chen, I'd like to discuss your proposals in more detail, perhaps over lunch. I'd be delighted, I replied, checking my watch. Though I should mention that I've invited Robert Anderson to join us. He's quite eager to reconnect with Pinnacle under the right circumstances. Marcus's eyebrows shot up. He's here? Now? Waiting in the restaurant across the street, I confirmed. Shall we? As we walked toward the elevator, I caught my reflection in the polished doors. Confident, powerful, vindicated. The woman I had become in this second chance at life bore little resemblance to the one who had been crushed by betrayal in my previous timeline. This time, I had changed the ending to my story. And Vanessa's was just beginning to unravel. The elevator doors closed with a soft chime, sealing Vanessa and me inside the small metal box. She had cornered me as I returned from my lunch with Marcus and Robert Anderson, a lunch that had ended with handshakes and a preliminary agreement to restore Anderson Enterprises as Pinnacle's premier client. "You think you're so clever," she hissed, her finger jabbing the emergency stop button. The elevator jolted to a halt between the 10th and 11th floors. "Swooping in with your money and your connections." I remained calm, maintaining a comfortable distance between us. The confined space smelled faintly of her perfume mixed with desperation, a sour note that hadn't been part of her signature scent before. "This isn't about cleverness, Vanessa, it's about consequences." Her carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the blotchy redness creeping up her neck. "Look, I know I took some liberties with credit. That happens everywhere in this industry. You know it does." Her tone shifted suddenly, becoming almost conspiratorial. "We could work together. I have connections you don't. Relationships I've built over years." "Relationships built on my work," I reminded her. "Fine, yes," she threw up her hands. "I used your ideas, and I'm sorry, truly sorry." Her eyes glistened with what might have been genuine tears. "But I can make it right. We can split everything going forward, the credit, the bonuses, everything, 50-50. I studied her face, the face that had smiled while taking everything from me in my previous life, the face that had shown no remorse until consequences loomed. "No," I said simply. She blinked, clearly not expecting such a direct refusal. "What do you mean, no? I'm offering you half of everything." "Half of what isn't yours to offer." Her expression hardened. "You don't understand what you're doing. The board hasn't made any decisions yet. I still have influence. I could make things difficult for you." I reached past her and pressed the button to resume the elevator's journey. "You've already made things as difficult as you could, Vanessa. And here I am anyway." The elevator hummed back to life, ascending smoothly. Vanessa's shoulders slumped, her threat evaporating as quickly as it had formed. When the doors opened on the 15th floor, she made one last attempt. "I have expenses, Mia. A mortgage, my mother's medical bills." Her voice cracked. "If I lose this position—" "You should have thought about that before stealing someone else's work," I replied, stepping around her into the hallway. "Actions have consequences." The following morning, my phone rang as I was finishing my first cup of coffee. The early sunlight streamed through my apartment windows, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors. "Ms. Chen, this is Marcus Wells. I hope I'm not calling too early." "Not at all," I assured him, moving to the window to watch the city come alive below. "What can I do for you?" "The board met in emergency session last night after you left. We've unanimously approved your proposal for restructuring the marketing department." He paused. "With one modification, if you're amenable." I raised an eyebrow, though he couldn't see it. "What modification?" "We'd like you to consider taking a more active role. Not as an employee, but as the head of a special advisory committee with direct oversight of the transition. It would mean more involvement than you initially proposed." I considered the offer, watching a flock of birds wheel against the morning sky. I'd need complete autonomy in staffing decisions. "Absolutely," he agreed quickly. "After yesterday's revelations, the board is highly motivated to address the ethical concerns you raised." "And Vanessa?" He sighed heavily. "That's the other reason for my call. She's requested a meeting with you before the board finalizes her transition." "Transition," I repeated. That's a gentle word for termination." "We're exploring options," he said diplomatically. "But yes, her continued employment in her current role is untenable. She knows this." I agreed to the meeting more out of curiosity than anything else. What more could Vanessa possibly say? I discovered the answer 2 hours later when I arrived at Pinnacle to find not just Vanessa waiting in the conference room, but Director Chen as well. He rose when I entered, his expression a careful mask of professional courtesy. "Miss Chen, Mia, thank you for coming," he began. "I wanted to be here to personally express my regret for what happened under my leadership. I should have recognized what was happening." I set my portfolio on the table, remaining standing. "Yes, you should have." He flinched slightly at my directness. "I've worked with Vanessa to develop a proposal that might allow for rehabilitation rather than termination." a way forward that acknowledges the wrong done while allowing for redemption. I turned my attention to Vanessa, who looked like she hadn't slept. Is that why you wanted to see me? To ask for redemption? She nodded, pushing a folder across the table toward me. I've prepared a complete accounting of all the work I borrowed from you and others. I'm willing to issue public corrections and apologies. And in exchange? I asked, not touching the folder. Director Chen cleared his throat. We're proposing that Vanessa be demoted rather than terminated. She would work in a junior role under supervision at our Seattle office. With a significant pay cut, Vanessa added quickly, and a 2-year probationary period. I finally took a seat, considering them both. The conference room felt suddenly too warm, the recycled air heavy with desperation. Why should I agree to this? I asked. Give me one reason that benefits the company rather than just saving Vanessa's career. Director Chen leaned forward. Institutional knowledge. Despite everything, Vanessa has relationships with clients that would be difficult to replace overnight. A transition period would be less disruptive. It was a reasonable argument from a business perspective. I opened my portfolio and removed a single sheet of paper. I anticipated this request, I said. These are my conditions for considering any arrangement that doesn't include immediate termination. I slid the paper across to them, both leaned forward to read the list. 1. Full public disclosure of all intellectual theft. 2. Forfeiture of all bonuses received for fraudulent work. 3. Reassignment to the Rochester office, not Seattle. 4. 5-year ban on client-facing roles. 5. Quarterly ethics training conducted personally. 6. Direct reporting to the new marketing director. Vanessa's face paled as she read. Rochester, there's nothing in Rochester except the fulfillment center. Exactly, I confirmed. You'd be coordinating marketing materials distribution. No strategy work, no creative input. That's essentially a warehouse job, she protested. With your title and half your current salary, I acknowledged. Which is significantly more generous than what you deserve. Director Chen studied the list with a frown. These terms are extremely punitive. They're proportionate, I corrected, and non-negotiable. Vanessa pushed back from the table, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is vindictive. You're not interested in rehabilitation at all. You just want to humiliate me. I remained perfectly calm. If you prefer termination without reference, that can certainly be arranged. The threat hung in the air between us. Vanessa knew as well as I did that with her reputation already damaged, termination would make her virtually unemployable in our industry. My mother is sick, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. I'm her only support. Please, Mia. We used to be friends. We were never friends, I replied evenly. You were my mentor, then my betrayer, twice. Director Chen looked confused. Twice? I waved away the question. A figure of speech. Vanessa's eyes filled with tears that spilled onto her cheeks. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. I've apologized. What more do you want from me? The question hung between us, heavy with implication. What did I want? Revenge? Justice? Or something else entirely? I studied her face, truly studied it, and saw not the confident woman who had stolen my future, but someone broken by her own choices. The satisfaction I had anticipated feeling in this moment was strangely absent. I want you to understand the damage you've done, I said finally. Not just to me, but to yourself, to your integrity. That's why my terms are what they are. Not to punish you, but to ensure you never forget the consequences of betrayal. She wiped at her tears with trembling fingers. And if I accept these terms, if I go to Rochester and do everything you've demanded, will you forgive me then? The question caught me off guard. Forgiveness had never been part of my plan. That's not relevant to this discussion, I replied. This is a business decision, not a personal one. But we both knew that wasn't entirely true. Director Chen, sensing an opening, leaned forward. Perhaps we could modify the terms slightly. 4 years instead of 5 for the client ban? And quarterly reviews with the possibility of earlier advancement if certain ethical milestones are met? I shook my head. The terms are non-negotiable. Vanessa has until the end of business today to decide. After that, the board moves forward with termination. I gathered my portfolio and stood to leave. As I reached the door, Vanessa called after me. "You've changed, Mia. You used to be kind." I paused, my hand on the doorknob. I used to be naive. There's a difference. 3 days later, the company-wide email went out announcing a comprehensive restructuring of the marketing department. Buried in the middle was a brief note about Vanessa's decision to accept a position at our Rochester facility, effective immediately. She had taken the deal. That afternoon, as I was reviewing candidates for the new marketing director position, my assistant announced an unexpected visitor. "There's a woman here to see you. She says she's your mother." I froze, my pen hovering above the page. In both my lives, my relationship with my mother had been complicated at best, estranged at worst. We hadn't spoken in over a year. "Send her in," I said finally. The woman who entered looked older than I remembered, her hair grayer, her posture less confident. She clutched her purse with both hands as she approached my desk. "Mia," she said simply, "or do you prefer MJ now?" "Mother," I acknowledged. "What brings you here?" She set her purse down carefully. "Vanessa Winters contacted me. She thought I might persuade you to reconsider her position." Of course, one last desperate attempt to manipulate me through family pressure. "And did you come to advocate for her?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "I came to see my daughter," she replied. "The one I barely recognize anymore. The one who apparently became successful enough to buy part of a company without ever telling her mother." The accusation stung more than I expected. "We haven't exactly been in regular contact." "Whose fault is that?" she asked, but without real heat. She looked around my office, taking in the view, the expensive furniture, the trappings of success. "You've done well for yourself." "Yes," I agreed. "I have." An uncomfortable silence stretched between us. Finally, she sighed. "I'm not here to ask you to help Vanessa. I don't even know her. But I am curious about what happened to my daughter who used to believe in second chances." The words hit with unexpected force. In my quest for justice, had I lost something essential about myself? "Some betrayals don't deserve second chances," I said finally. My mother nodded slowly. "Perhaps. But I wonder if that's really for us to decide." She stood to leave. "Congratulations on your success, Mia. I hope it brings you what you're looking for." After she left, I sat motionless at my desk, her words echoing in my mind. The victory I had achieved suddenly felt hollow, incomplete. The next morning, I called an emergency board meeting. When everyone had assembled, I presented a modified proposal for Vanessa's situation. Still punitive, still serious, but with a clearer path to eventual redemption if she proved herself. "May I ask what prompted this change?" Marcus inquired after reviewing the new terms. I considered the question carefully. Let's just say I was reminded that the purpose of consequences isn't merely punishment, but the possibility of growth. The board approved the modifications unanimously. When I informed Vanessa of the changes, her response was a single text message. "Thank you." I didn't reply. Some bridges, once burned, could never be fully rebuilt, but perhaps they could be acknowledged from across the divide. That evening, as I stood on my balcony watching the sunset paint the city in shades of gold and crimson, I realized that true power wasn't found in revenge, but in having the ability to exact it and choosing something else instead. Not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps something like peace. 1 year later, I stood on the balcony of my penthouse office watching the sunset transform the city skyline into a canvas of amber and violet. The glass railing was cool beneath my palms as I leaned forward, breathing in the crisp autumn air. 18 floors below, people hurried home from work, their lives continuing in patterns they rarely questioned. How strange to think that exactly 2 years ago, in my previous life, I had been one of them, hurrying nowhere in particular, unaware that my career was about to implode. "Ms. Chen," my assistant's voice came through the intercom. "The quarterly reports are ready for your review, and Mr. Anderson called to confirm dinner next week." "Thank you, Elise," I replied, turning away from the view reluctantly. "You can head home. I'll lock up." The office was quiet after she left. just the gentle hum of the climate system and the occasional distant siren from the streets below. I moved through the space, my space, appreciating the clean lines and thoughtful design. Horizon Ventures had expanded beyond my expectations, now occupying the entire floor of this downtown building. My desk held a single framed photo, not of family or friends, but of the ocean at dawn, taken during my solo trip to Bali 3 months ago. A reminder of perspective, of the vastness beyond corporate ambitions and personal vendettas. My phone buzzed with a calendar notification. Marketing team celebration, 7 p.m. I smiled, gathering my jacket and bag. This was one appointment I had been looking forward to all week. The restaurant was only a few blocks away, a trendy space with exposed brick walls and warm lighting. As I approached the private room we'd reserved, laughter spilled into the hallway. "There she is," called Zoe as I entered. She had been the first person I'd hired when rebuilding the marketing department at Pinnacle, rescuing her from the toxic environment that had remained after my departure. Now she led the creative team with an enthusiasm that inspired everyone around her. The room was filled with faces that had become familiar over the past year. Talented individuals I had personally selected not just for their skills, but for their integrity and collaborative spirit. They raised their glasses as I joined them. "To another record-breaking quarter," announced Marcus, who had proven himself a surprisingly adaptable CEO, once freed from the influence of those who prioritize shortcuts over substance. "And to the woman who made it possible," added Robert Anderson, who had become both a valued client and a trusted advisor. I accepted a glass of champagne with a smile, the bubbles catching the light like tiny stars. "The success belongs to all of us," I said, meaning it sincerely, "to the team." As dinner progressed, I found myself observing more than participating in the animated conversations around me. These people, my people, were thriving. The marketing department I had restructured was now Pinnacle's crown jewel, attracting top talent and delivering innovative campaigns that had restored the company's reputation. "Penny for your thoughts?" asked Robert, sliding into the chair beside me as dessert was served. "Just appreciating the moment," I replied. "A year ago, none of this seemed possible." He nodded thoughtfully. "It's remarkable what you've accomplished, though I'm still surprised you didn't take a more prominent role at Pinnacle yourself. You could have had any position you wanted." I traced the rim of my water glass with one finger. I prefer the freedom of being the power behind the throne, so to speak. More flexibility, less politics. "And what about Vanessa?" he asked quietly. "Any word from Rochester?" The question didn't sting as it once might have. "Quarterly reports, as required by our agreement. She's doing well, actually. Reorganized the distribution system, saved the company a considerable amount in shipping costs. Redemption story in the making?" he suggested with a raised eyebrow. "Perhaps," I acknowledged, though some lessons leave permanent marks. The celebration continued late into the evening, but I slipped away shortly after 10, preferring the quiet of my own thoughts to the increasingly boisterous festivities. The night air was cool against my skin as I walked the few blocks home, the city pulsing with energy around me. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother, our weekly check-in, a new tradition that had begun tentatively after her unexpected visit last year. Small steps toward rebuilding what had been broken long before my rebirth. 3 weeks later, I found myself at the National Marketing Conference in Chicago, presenting a keynote on ethical leadership in the digital age. The irony wasn't lost on me, speaking about ethics after orchestrating such an elaborate revenge. But perhaps that made me uniquely qualified to understand the consequences of crossing certain lines. As I gathered my materials after the presentation, a familiar figure approached from the side of the stage. Vanessa, she looked different. Her designer clothes replaced by a simple blazer and slacks, her once perfect manicure now practical and unadorned. The Rochester assignment had changed her physically as well as professionally. "Excellent presentation," she said, maintaining a respectful distance. "Particularly the part about accountability." I studied her face, searching for signs of the old resentment or manipulation. Finding none, I nodded. "Thank you. I didn't expect to see you here." Regional representatives were invited this year, she explained. I almost didn't come when I saw you were speaking, but she hesitated. I wanted to thank you. Not for the demotion or the public humiliation, obviously, but for the second chance when you could have destroyed me completely. The busy convention center continued to buzz around us, attendees rushing between sessions, unaware of the significant moment unfolding in their midst. You're doing well in Rochester? I asked, deflecting the implicit request for absolution. I'm doing honest work, she replied with a small smile. It's surprisingly satisfying. An awkward silence stretched between us, filled with unspoken history. Your mother visits the facility sometimes, she said finally. Did you know that? She volunteers with our community outreach program. I hadn't known. My relationship with my mother was improving, but there were still boundaries, still topics we carefully avoided. She's always been drawn to lost causes, I said, then immediately regretted the harshness of my words. Vanessa didn't flinch. I deserved that. But for what it's worth, I'm not the same person who stole your work. That woman was desperate and insecure, and willing to sacrifice others to get ahead. And now? She considered the question seriously. Now I understand what it means to build something real. Something that can't be taken away because it's based on actual work, not shortcuts. A conference organizer approached, signaling that the next speaker needed the stage. Our time was up. Good luck with your presentation tomorrow, Vanessa said, turning to leave. You're presenting? I asked, surprised. She nodded. A small workshop on distribution efficiency. Nothing glamorous, but it's mine. Every word of it. As she walked away, I felt something unexpected. Not forgiveness exactly, but a loosening of the knot that had bound us together in resentment. We would never be friends, never fully trust one another. But perhaps we could exist in the same industry without the weight of our history defining us completely. 2 months later, I declined an invitation to speak at the Global Marketing Summit, choosing instead to take a long overdue vacation. The small coastal town in Portugal was exactly what I needed. Quiet, authentic, far from the corporate world I had mastered. My beachfront cottage offered a perfect view of the Atlantic, endless and humbling in its power. Each morning, I woke with the sun, carrying my laptop and a cup of coffee to the small wooden deck. It was there, with the rhythm of waves as my soundtrack, that I began writing. Not marketing strategies or business proposals, but the story of my journey. A memoir of sorts, though no publisher would ever believe the rebirth aspect. I wrote it anyway for myself, as a way to process everything that had happened across 2 lifetimes. On my final morning in Portugal, I sat on the beach at dawn, watching the sun emerge from the horizon in a spectacular display of orange and gold. My laptop was open beside me, the cursor blinking at the end of the completed manuscript. A notification popped up, an email from Marcus with the subject line, "Interesting development." Vanessa had been offered a position with a competitor based on her innovative work in Rochester. She had declined, instead requesting consideration for a lateral move within Pinnacle to head the newly created Ethical Compliance Division. Marcus was seeking my input as major shareholder and advisory board chair. The decision was technically mine to make. I closed the laptop without responding, turning my attention back to the sunrise. The answer could wait. This moment, this perfect, peaceful moment, could not. The ocean stretched before me, vast and indifferent to human concerns. Seabirds wheeled overhead, their calls carrying on the salt-tinged breeze. For the first time since my rebirth, I felt completely present, unburdened by the past, or anxious about the future. I had achieved everything I'd set out to do, reclaimed my work, established my reputation, secured my financial future. But the true victory wasn't in the revenge I'd exacted or the success I'd achieved. It was in this moment of perfect clarity, understanding that I was finally free from the cycle of betrayal and retribution that had defined both my lives. Later, I would return to the cottage and respond to Marcus. I would tell him that Vanessa should be given the opportunity she sought, not because she deserved forgiveness, but because growth should be recognized and encouraged. I would continue building my consulting empire, mentoring young professionals, perhaps even reconnecting with family I'd neglected. But for now, I simply sat on the cool sand as the rising sun warmed my face, completely at peace with my choices, and the knowledge that success without betrayal, success built on genuine ability and integrity, was indeed the sweetest revenge. The waves continued their eternal rhythm, washing away footprints only to create a fresh canvas with each retreat. Nature's lesson in letting go, in constant renewal. I closed my eyes and smiled. Some second chances were worth the journey, no matter how painful the path.